Hey everybody, Andrew from Gameosity here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Neom, which is a tile drafting, tile laying, city building game from Lookout. In Neom, every player is going to start with a slightly unique city board, and what makes them unique is that each city is going to be producing a different base resource, and it is a tile drafting game. So played out over the course of 3 generations, players are going to get piles of city tiles. You'll look through, pick which one you're going to add to your city, and then pass the rest along. The tiles themselves are the sort of basic SimCity city components, which is to say residential blocks and industrial blocks and commercial blocks, and as well as power and some other resource tiles as well. And over the course of those 3 generations, you'll draft your tiles, you'll build out your city from the city center, and you'll look to score the most points by the end of the game. What's interesting about Neom, well, a few things. Let's take a look at some specifics. So here is your city. This is one of the city boards. As I said, what makes each of them unique is that each city starts with a different basic resource that it produces. And whenever your city generates a new sort of resource, you will get a little token that you'll stack up here that will make it easy at a glance for you or your fellow city builders to know what your city produces. But as I said, the basics of city tile laying are when you add a tile to your city because you're drafting it, you will have to pay or provide whatever the cost is that's listed there, and then depending on the tile type, the effect that takes place when they get added to the city is variable. So residential tiles, for example, they're worth victory points, and also they want to be built into neighborhoods. The bigger a cluster of residential tiles, the better. Oh, and incidentally, every tile must be connected by a straight route to the city center via roads, but that doesn't mean that you can't have breaks in the roads. It's just from any given tile you need to be able to trace a line back to the middle of your city. Now, this basic resource is what your city produces to begin with, but you'll definitely have the opportunity to add additional resources, and as I said, when your city creates another resource, you'll add the associated marker up here to the top. And as far as costs go, coins need to get spent and paid to the bank when you're using them to pay for tiles, but resources don't get used up, and as long as your city produces them, then you can use them as currency to add tiles in future drafts. So you see this one needs oil because it's gas stations, and then you've added this commercial district to your city. And some tiles, like this one, will produce an immediate effect, like gives you 3 coins now, and some might also produce an ongoing effect, which is an end-of-round income. So once you've got gas stations, at the end of every round you're going to be picking up 3 coins. There are industrial zones as well, as I said, and these will produce more complex goods. So you see, instead of the basic goods, now you've got an additional manufactured good and luxury goods eventually. The problem, of course, is that industrial zones are pollutants, and so you're actually going to take a ding on points if you've got any of them next to your residential areas like this. And another kind of space in your city are these public buildings. These are kind of untyped, and most of them are worth lots of victory points, and they often confer endgame scoring opportunities or one-time effects that are really neat and powerful. And so the strategy in Neom comes from a few different places. First of all, at the very beginning of the game, everyone is going to draft what they call Cornerstone Tiles. And these are slightly different tiles than the sort that we've already seen. These are major endgame scoring engines, and you'll know what you have from the very beginning of the game, so you can kind of craft your strategy around them. So if you've got a shopping center that gives you income and points for every commercial district, you get to sort of take that into account and lean on that as a strategy for when you're drafting tiles. The other thing is that everybody sees what everybody's cornerstone tiles are, so you do have a sense of what your opponents are possibly going to be aiming for. Everybody has 3 cornerstones Cornerstone Tiles, and if you're very lucky in the draft, they might be a little synergistic, but each of them represents a pretty wide variety of ways of scoring points. The other thing to keep in mind is that in order to pay for the different resources that you need, first of all, to pay for them, you're going to need coins, and at the end of every generation, there's an income phase, so you'll want to divide your attention between tiles that give you points and tiles that produce resources and tiles that produce income so that you can keep the engine going. And you can always discard tiles to get some coins in the middle of the round if you really need them. Or if you want to make sure that you're discarding a tile that somebody else definitely will want. The potential for hate drafting is definitely present. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is if your city doesn't produce a resource that you need for a tile, and somebody else's does, you can just pay them and make use of their resource. It doesn't deplete their city's resource, just like you using your own doesn't deplete yours. They get coin for your use of their resource, and they actually can't refuse to allow you to do that. It's not really a choice. You just hand them some coins, say, I'm using your cement mixer this round, and then you can place in your own city. And what's kind of neat is you can actually build out what they call trade routes. If you connect roads leading out of your city from either of the two sides, that reduces the cost of buying resources from your fellow players. And so all of these factors kind of circle around each other, and it makes it so that while the drafting in the game is actually pretty quick, especially once everybody has sort of a handle on the iconography, and I'll talk about that in a second, it really is interesting to see how people's cities will begin to develop, and this little interconnectedness without actually being able to influence each other's cities in any way sort of directly. There is a point of contention, though, one real opportunity for players to kind of mess with each other a little bit beyond just keeping an eye on what the other player's doing, and that is these disaster tiles. Every generation has a disaster tile that when it gets played, it immediately affects everyone's city but the person who has played it, and they vary in impact from either essentially paying coins to mitigate something to losing tiles. Sometimes a lot of coins or a lot of tiles if it's the third generation disaster. And the thing about the disaster tiles that feels a little restrictive is that they can't be discarded for coins. You either you play them when you draft it, or you pass it and hope no one plays it. And so there's this tension of a potential take that moment, which is a kind of your mileage may vary aspect of the game that is otherwise very much about this additive city building sort of thing. Hi. So Jess is out from behind the camera because Jess loves games where you get to build something. So her opinion's a big part of why we ultimately like Neom, right?
Yeah. I really like games like this are very satisfying to me because I really enjoy seeing how the city evolves over time.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I didn't mention yet, which is kind of neat, is that when you're placing tiles in Neom, you can actually build over tiles that are already in your city. And so while there is that puzzle of like putting the city together and what tiles do I want to draft and what tile does somebody else want, you can also, like, the things that you've got can't be moved, but they can possibly be replaced. So that's an even bigger layer of strategy right there. Overall, I thought I also liked it. I thought it was very successful. The only negatives, aside from complexity of iconography, which we just talked about, are these disaster tiles.
Yeah, well, I mean, the designers actually created a fix for that. So
yeah, I mean a fix of what they describe as an official variant. There's actually two kind of neat variants for the tiles. Look, there's nothing wrong with the disaster tiles if your group.
Yeah, if you take that, then it's a great part of the game. If you're like us and not so big on it, then you play one of the variants and it sort of takes the teeth out of it. Yeah, it either takes the disasters out or it lets you have them affect everyone so no one feels picked on.
Exactly. In one of those variants, they tell you which tiles to swap out, and that's important because some tiles interact directly with disasters, and so it's important to keep in mind, which tiles you're actually getting rid of. And changing. And then in the other variant, that generation's disaster just sits in the middle of the table and has a countdown timer on it, basically, and then when it goes off, it hits everybody, and you have to kind of deal with it.
That one's kind of nice because you know it's coming, and so you can plan for it.
So it adds tension, but a different kind of tension than which of my friends is going to be a jerk this round, and should I be the jerk this round, and is it better for me to play a disaster tile rather than get a tile I need this turn?
Yeah.
Because that's the assessment. Other than that, I really love how it turns this sort of city building, tile laying thing into this kind of streamlined experience. You want to watch where your tiles are going. Think about your supply chain. Think about where tiles are in relation to each other. If your city doesn't have a certain number of residential districts at the end of the game, you're a ghost town and you lose points.
You need people.
If you don't have power at the end of the game, you're I don't know, that's pretty post-apocalyptic, and you lose points. And otherwise, you're just like trying to be smart with your strategy about what you're adding, when and where, and I think it really works.
I agree.
We should talk about the seven wondrous elephant in the room.
Yeah, I think it's different enough from Seven Wonders that you can have both, and they both serve their own purpose, but they are very close in game style.
Yeah, I mean, very, very close. And you could argue that, Seven Wonders is... you could argue that any number of drafting games are like Seven Wonders or like each other. But this, because it's city building, because you're getting basic resources that give you advanced resources, and they don't get spent, and you're sharing resources. Well, you buy resources from each other. Exactly, you share them. It feels very similar.
But with this, you get a board, you get tiles, you get to see how the city builds on itself instead of just having piles of cards in front of you.
The layout puzzle, right, was something that
It's a nice puzzle in itself, and I find that a satisfying part of the game.
I completely agree. And while it is true that we were reading the rules and we were like, it's Seven Wonders, It's fine that it feels that way, but it doesn't feel like, oh, this is just a cheap knockoff. It's kind of a board gamer version of the core conceits and mechanics that Seven Wonders does incredibly well. But like you say, this isn't that again.
No, it's its own thing, and I appreciate it for that.
Yeah, it has some shared DNA. But
what doesn't?
What doesn't at this point? I think ultimately we recommend Neom, especially for groups that are going to be able to play it a few times with the same couple of people, because then the iconography becomes second nature, and you're going to be able to just sort of windmill through it, and especially when drafting those cornerstones, your first game, whatever. Just grab ones that you can kind of grok the strategy as quickly as possible.
Or you think are just cool.
or you think are just cool. In fact, there's a beginner's variant where you just deal them out randomly, and everybody just sort of learns as they go, and that's kind of neat. Yeah. But overall, final thoughts? You're happy here?
Yeah, I really like it. I think it works very well, and I'm always happy to play it again.
Yeah, nice tiles, nice presentation, excellent gameplay, and all around strong recommendation from us. Anyway, I'm Andrew. This is Jess. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next game. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, check out this playlist over here. And if you want to see some of our shorter form reviews, check out our Game of the Minutes over here. And to subscribe to Gameosity and follow along with all of our goofiness, click the giant G. I'm doing the goofy dance just for you.